So joining me now is Nikhil Jairam, who also goes by Nick. Nick has been writing for some time in Los Angeles for the entertainment industry, and he's now been picked up as a writer for season 2 of NBC's The Mysteries of Laura. Nick has also been a part of the teams for various other shows like CW's Beauty and the Beast, as well as Stars' Power. So, Nick, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here, and it's always cool to shed a little light on what we writers do behind the curtain.
First off, congrats on the new writing gig. What is it about Mysteries of Laura that you're really excited to be working on with this team?
There's different things. Regarding the show itself, I tend to write darker drama, but I really do like shows that have a bit of comedy in them, and Mysteries of Laura allowed me to use that part of my brain. I also enjoy that it's a female-centric show. I enjoy that the main character is a professional and a mom and juggling all of them and never one or the other. I think that's a more realistic portrayal than we often see in TV, where someone's a mom of two who are going to Harvard and also the most powerful attorney in the world and in perfect shape, and somehow you never wonder how this person divides his or her time. So I think our show is a little bit more realistic in the portrayal, and that anybody who has to deal with being the primary caregiver at home and having a full-time gig can at times be a little bit frazzled. I also like serials where you have to watch every single episode. I like telling a case of the week. I enjoy all of that, and there's benefits to both. But that was definitely fun, and I have a lot of cool ideas, things that could play out as our season progresses.
You know, you're here in season 2. There's a team of writers that have already been there for season 1. And sometimes you see a lot of credit being given around for success or maybe even the lack of success. And you're not really quite sure, as someone who's not working in that industry, where it really all belongs or how it all happens.
Really, it's a team game, and it's always a team game, the success and the failures, whatever. Fitting in on a season 2 show when I'm new, I wasn't too worried about it, honestly. I'd seen all the episodes from season 1, and I understood the formula. I understood, for the most part, how it worked. And part of it is they were changing the feel of the show a little bit. They thought season 1 was a little heightened, a little too fun, lacking a certain degree of seriousness that they wanted in season 2. And some people who were in season 1 were brought in for that elevated sense of storytelling, but as the requirements of the show changed, they shuffle some people in, shuffle some people out. So I was brought in specifically for this next season. So that is a lot of what goes on. And I just wasn't too worried about fitting again. Part of why is because I knew my boss. And that's a very fortunate situation that most entry-level staff writers don't really get.
Right.
You know, they may meet with their boss, interview with their boss, get the job because their boss liked them, but they don't know their boss. And I already knew my boss, and that was tremendously beneficial.
Well, that does sound like a tremendous advantage, especially we consider that there were so many cancellations announced in NBC back in May. So there was a variety of comedies like Marry Me and About a Boy and One Big Happy, as well as dramas like Constantine and State of Affairs that didn't make it. You started to work right after this when it's announced that Mysteries of Laura is going to be renewed for a second season. So what was the tone of the writing staff as you joined them? You know, was it coming to a situation where everybody was really relieved after having been on edge, or were they just past that and moving forward?
We understood that NBC had a pretty bad string of luck there, where a lot of their shows went down, and that we honestly may have benefited from that, and that somebody had to live. So we definitely knew that. We didn't take that as a knock on our show. We actually have a pretty steady audience and steady demographic, and Deborah Messing's a big star, but it depends on what they're looking for. And if every show were Breaking Bad, no show would be Breaking Bad, if that makes sense. Anyway, the point is, we weren't getting too high, and we started the season saying we've got to secure the back 9, or at least some back episodes. What that means is, unless you're a super successful show, you get 13 episodes in a season with the option to have up to 9 or 10 or 11 more, depending on the show. So 13 episodes will take you only so far, but most shows on network TV that are successful get 22, some get 23 or 24. And we came in with our goal, let's put out some amazing episodes in the beginning so that our ratings will be solid, the network will know what's coming down the pike, and they will give us some back episodes. And that is the viewpoint of the writing staff. So we're doing the best we can. We can't really control if people watch the beginning, you know, the premiere and that's marketing, but we can control if they like what they see and come back to an extent.
Looking into a little bit of your past here and moving away from the show itself, and I understand that this is your first job as a staffed writer on a show. You have been writing for some time and have even gotten accepted into some programs like the CBS Writers Mentoring and NBC's Writers on the Verge program. So you have some accolades to your name, especially for someone who's young. So at one point, you actually had to turn down an offer into the Disney ABC writing program. So take me to that moment when that happens. What's going on through your head when you actually make the decision to do that, which eventually leads you to this, but to that moment when you actually turn down something that so many other people are probably really coveting and trying to do?
Yeah, I won't say it was a decision I took lightly. Because you're right, thousands of people try to get into that program, let alone, be one of the winners. So it was not an easy choice, but ABC's system involves you working exclusively with them for the duration of your fellowship, and that would have meant I could not accept anything NBC gave me, meetings, offers of staffing, nothing. And to me, I had worked hard to earn my NBC privileges, and I didn't think it was appropriate that I should have to relinquish them to be in another fellowship. And I thought about the kinds of shows ABC puts out and the kinds of things I write, and ABC is known for these soaps that do well, and NBC, while it has had some difficulty lately, it's still a place that has more so the types of shows I would write. So thinking about those things made it clear to me that I think sticking with NBC was the right call. And that first year after that, I did not get a job. ABC does pay to put you on a show, not staff writer wages. You'll be an employee of ABC's diversity department, and then you have to get a job after that and hope it works out. And it was a calculated risk, and that year I didn't get a job. It was not easy, but I never thought I made the wrong choice.
Are there things that you've already seen that you think really help the writing environment that maybe some shows do or others don't? Or is it really just unique circumstances and unique chemistry, on a case-by-case basis, just the uniqueness of every staff and team?
It is difficult to model out. I wouldn't say there's a golden rule, honestly. Granted, a happier workforce will put out good writing, but some of the best shows have come from very unhappy writers' rooms. I do think, however, getting the most out of your writers, allowing them to participate and contribute, but also setting parameters, okay, now we're going in a direction. Basically, a benevolent dictatorship seems to be a strong approach. Now, as you've said, this is the only show I've written on, but I've been an assistant on several shows, and a benevolent dictatorship would seem to be the strongest approach to a show because a show needs direction and it needs someone in control of it and it needs consistency. Whether the audience likes that or not, that's hard to say. However, they definitely don't like inconsistent shows that waver and change direction. So I feel like that is the way to go. At some point, democracy must end and a choice must be made. And the showrunner is the one running the show.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever heard anyone use a term like that, but it makes so much sense the way you describe it, benevolent dictatorship. But you're making me think back to Rick Grimes standing up at the end of season 2 on Walking Dead saying, okay, democracy's over. I'm running things now. This is about survival. So years ago, when the writer's strike happened, I remember reading something that Robert Ben Garant, I believe, he played Junior on Reno 911. And he had really pointed things to say about why it was important to support the writers when that was happening. He went off and did a really good job of listing off some of the things that people outside of the business wrongly think about writers and lumping them maybe with actors and some of the preferential treatment or the pay or even the benefits that they may or may not get. So what do you think are some of the biggest misconceptions that you've come across that people who are not in the industry have about writers?
Well, not every writer wears glasses and is nerdy, but a lot are. Writers, yes, we do make a good living. But the thing is, our jobs are in a constant state of uncertainty. Constant. Which is what people don't realize. We don't work the full year. At any given time, we're unemployed for 3, 4, 5, 6 months of a year. We get paid well while we're working, but we could be cut any time. There's very rarely sort of a contract that protects you. And writers still have to pay a huge percentage of what they make to agents and managers and attorneys. That's part of it. But the bigger reasons behind the strike were that studios make a ton of money off what writers create. Way, way, way more than the writers make. So when people have by far the lion's share of the pie that you baked, and you're asking for a slightly bigger slice, it doesn't seem like an imposition, nor does it seem like it's improper or privileged or snotty or spoiled or selfish. It seems like you want a larger portion of the sustenance you provided. As writers, I think that's how they felt about the strike at that time. And a lot of people may have doubted it, but I do feel that in time it will bear out that it was the right move to make, especially with the internet and online viewing and all of that having taken off. That strike was really about getting a foothold in the digital world. And if they hadn't struck, they'd have nothing in the digital world right now. So maybe that's a misconception people have about writers. I truly don't know what outsiders think about writers.
Do you feel that there's sufficient diversity in the writing teams on various shows, or does it really just depend on the shows?
There's a gigantic lack of diversity, and that includes simply having females, by the way. Women, who are over half the viewing audience, are grossly underrepresented. And that is what happens. It's not only our business, but it's more so our business because we're not a business where we have statistics. We don't have resumes. We don't have SAT scores or GMATs. We don't have the law school you went to. Nobody cares about that stuff. If your writing is good, nobody cares if you went to Sasquatch University or Harvard. It doesn't really matter if you're a writer. So there is definitely a lack of representation, and audiences want to watch shows that have sufficient diversity. People want to see people who can kind of relate to them or their experiences. And programs like the ones I went through, NBC, for example, really tries to get its writers in through a subsidy for shows like mine, Mysteries of Laura, where they were strapped financially. And my boss wanted me, and he was able to get me. Now, my situation is kind of the ideal in that the boss knew me, had read my writing, and then was able to get me because of the subsidy as opposed to being hired based on a subsidy and not treated like you're worth more than that. And that's the double-edged sword. Oftentimes, the diversity subsidy, it leads to this belief that, oh, well, a diversity writer should only be free. I shouldn't have to pay for one, which is garbage as well. But some of that depends on the person in charge. So, unfortunately, it's not often a business where it's simply, let's read this person. Ah, this writing is good. Let's meet this person. I like this person. Okay. It's like going to the cafeteria and what group of kids do you want to sit with most? And it's often that. So I hope that makes sense of what I'm saying.
Yes.
It's a problem that needs to be addressed, and in some ways is being addressed, in some ways is being reinforced, and really what has to happen is people who are open-minded need to eventually get in charge, and then they will be able to make the changes they wish to see.
Now, building off a little bit of your discussion about your views of diversity in this industry, your family is from India. You're part of the first generation born here in the US, which I can relate because I'm also a first generation born here in the US. So I can tell from your earlier work, particularly the things that you did while studying at Northwestern University, that family and cultural identity are very important to you. Shifting gears a little bit and getting a little more personal into your journey as a writer, how did your family react to your decision to work as a writer for the entertainment industry?
My family was actually pretty supportive. They felt like you should do what you want to do, what you love, but also be the best at it. So in college, they were definitely uncertain because I wanted to get into entertainment, but I won a couple grants and they saw some of my short films and work and they said, okay, we think you do have a talent for this. I wanted to go to LA to pursue it. They gave me their blessing, also knowing I was going to do it anyway. And then from there, they were with me during the struggle. They knew it was hard and they felt bad for me that I was struggling so hard and barely scraping enough to get by. I didn't have any kind of advancement, but they, like most people, only know the sort of linear progression of, white-collar gigs. Law or medicine or even being an executive at some company, whatever, those kinds of options, what they offer. And once I started winning these fellowships, that's when they felt, okay, we're feeling better about what's happening here. Though they asked, is there a deadline for when you would get out of this industry and go seek a regular career? And I said, well, if by age of 30 I don't know whether I got what it takes, I would probably get out. I felt like I had what it takes a long time before that, but I'd started winning these fellowships, so by age 30, I was able to tell them, I definitely have what it takes, I'm sticking with it. Now, of course, my mom said, well, you said you'd have a job. I said, no. I'd only said I'd know I had what it takes.
Very important distinction there.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, talking about, again, the show that you're working on now, The Mysteries of Laura, it's clear that the driving force of this show is Deborah Messing's character and her struggle to really strike a balance between all these different facets of her life that are just so demanding. There's her work, there's her evolving relationship with her ex-husband, and then there's her children. So is there anything you can fill us in on where season 2 is going to be taking Laura Diamond now that those struggles have been well established in season 1?
I can say that the tone of the show is going to be a little more grounded. Still very fun, but a little more serious. So that will reflect on the cases we have every week, as well as her relationships. And I think as well, she's going to grow a bit closer to her coworkers because people really did enjoy seeing her forming bonds with her coworkers, and we'd like to explore that a little more in this season. So those will be some of the things on tap, as well as just some very intriguing cases coming your way.
All right. Well, Nick Jarom, a pleasure, honestly, learning a little bit about the writer's side of the industry. I think we tend to focus a lot on sort of the star power, the front-facing aspect, which is the actors mainly. But thanks very much for your time, and we look forward to talking again later.